Julius Caesar. You think you know some stories, but the truth is much darker and deeper. And some person have lived lives worth telling like him, everywhere from Spain to the premier of barbarian tribes, from northern Europe to the brutal steppes of Anatolia, from Egypt's Nile to the wet islands of the Mediterranean. Gus like Caesar, who won victories like Julius Caesar. Rome is one of the most important states that have existed throughout history, and perhaps the one that left us the most stories to be told. Let's go to the exciting times of Rome now, and let's be a guest in the life of the most important name of those years, 100 Caesar nobles before Christ. He was born in a wealthy home as a child of Julian Eller family. He received a very good education. For the Roman nobles, their children were future statesmen and generals, and great importance was given to the education they would receive in fields such as mathematics and law. But luck was not good for Caesar, as his family's political rivals prevailed. All his assets were confiscated, many of his relatives were killed, and when his father died suddenly, he had to take over the family at the age of 16. From then on, the action in his life will never decrease. Caesar, who joined the Roman army in Asia at a young age, was kidnapped by pirates during his journey to the Aegean Islands, where he received oratory training from philosophers. The pirates asked Caesar for 20 talents of gold in return. He told them to ask for 50 talents. After his release, he quickly built a fleet. Caesar kept his promise to himself, caught the pirates who kidnapped him, and was crucified in today's Turkey. He is only in his 20s. Yes, there is news from Rome, news of the rebellion of the slaves. A rebellion started by the gladiator named Spartacus and his friends. Although it is not certain that the young Caesar, who became famous for his courage and success in the wars, had a role in the suppression of the rebellion, considering that he was on duty in the Senate at that time, it is highly likely that he was involved in the events. As a matter of fact, the Spartacus rebellion was the Roman general Crassus, and Pompey was suppressed by Magnus, and 6,000 rebels were crucified on the road to Rome without any mercy and showing the bloody face of Rome. In this process, Caesar was working as a lawyer from time to time, and sometimes he took small positions in the Senate, the Senate of the Roman Republic. Yes, Rome was a republic in those years. There was neither a king nor a tyrant. In the light of philosophers such as Cicero and Cato, who were dedicated to protecting the values of the republic, we have a Rome that accepted that freedom was religiously sacred. Caesar was appointed to Gaul by the Senate in a short time. This marks the beginning of the most important process of his life and the first link of our adventure. Gaul is a region that includes modern-day France and Comene. There is a dense population full of barbarian warriors and cruel tribes, and they are really good at military service. It is eerie and dark. On the other side is an ambitious Roman Gaius Julius Caesar, who has only 20,000 soldiers at his command. But he is in debt and makes a good profit by exploiting Galla. He knows very well that if he does not win, he will be erased from Roman history. However, he will show that he is a genius in the Gallic campaign, and years later, his name will be remembered together with Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, and Emir Timur. Caesar fought a total of 3 million enemy soldiers in the 8-year Gallic conquests. 1 million of them were killed, and 1 million were sold as slaves. He achieved victory after victory, defeated 300 tribes, burned 800 cities. But there is a victory here, which is considered one of the most cleverly won wars in history. Caesar's army is between 40 and 60,000. His army reaches 250,000 soldiers, and the battlefield is a magnificent front spread over approximately 30 kilometers. Caesar built 16 kilometers of wooden walls to surround the city of Alesia. Instead, he built a separate 18-kilometer row of wooden walls facing outwards, so they were caught between both the Gallic army inside and the Gallic army outside. Even though it looked like a definitive defeat from the outside, this was already his plan. The Romans used more than 500,000 tons of rubble by human hand to build these walls. And they carried soil and stacked hundreds of thousands of tons of timber. In the battle that lasted for months, even Caesar himself took part in the conflict with his sword. The result was 12,000 Roman soldiers died, and the losses of the Gauls amounted to 100,000 tons. Moreover, the king of all Gaul was captured. Caesar was literally from inside the country. Caesar, who was also a good writer, described the events in detail in his book Notes on the Gallic Campaign. Of course, by doing a little propaganda, Caesar proved that great victories are won, not with numbers, but with intelligence. So much so that the discipline of Caesar's army greatly affected today's military service, and the soldiers expressed their dissatisfaction. Or even the punishment for disobeying orders was crucifixion. Everything was fair. There was no discrimination. But an army cannot be ruled by punishments alone. Caesar lives with his soldiers. He eats what they eat. He masterfully ensures their loyalty. Almost all of his soldiers remained loyal to him until his death. The military practices of Rome and ultimately Caesar are interesting, however. It also deeply affected Nazi Germany. The famous Nazi salute for Hitler is a famous Roman salute used for Roman generals, and ultimately for Caesar. Even the ceremonial Nazi army formation and a significant part of Nazi symbols were inspired by the Romans. The source of this situation was Hitler's admiration for Rome, so much so that Hitler saw himself as a new Caesar. He saw that for the German people, whom he considered superior, there was nothing left in history other than pottery. He said, "Only the works of the Romans are still standing." Caesar had conquered the whole Galia and entered England when bad news began to come one after another. His friend Pompey Magnus had died while giving birth to his beloved daughter, who was married. Crassus, who was one of his followers and suppressed the Spartacus rebellion, lost the war against the Parthians in Harran, which is located in today's Turkish territory, around the same time, and the Parthians executed him by pouring molten gold into his mouth due to his greed for money. In addition, the Roman Senate was disturbed by the wealth and power he had achieved in the Gaul, which he exploited for 8 years and took him back. To prevent uncontrolled power, the Roman system is indispensable. There would be 2 consuls at the head of the Roman Senate, and the consuls would change every year. If one person became powerful enough to upset the balance of the scales, it could lead to tyranny in Rome, and this could lead to the collapse of the state. For this reason, the Senate would definitely keep the overly powerful generals under control. According to the religious belief of the Romans, since the Senate and the Republic were sacred, the people were strictly against one person taking over the government. So much so that one of the most important gods of the Roman religion was the goddess of freedom, Libertas. The inspiration for the Statue of Liberty in America was also the goddess Libertas, Rome. In the Republic, the people had the power to veto the decisions of the Senate. Of course, this was a big problem for Caesar. The power he had achieved could be taken away significantly with the investigations that would be opened against him. He had 2 options. Either he would go to Rome with his army. Soldiers were forbidden to enter Rome, and this meant civil war. Or he would come as a civilian, and in this case he would fight the investigations opened against him. Caesar came to the edge of the Rubicon River near Rome with his 13 legions, beyond the Rubicon River. Only as a civilian can be entered. Caesar waited for a while. Taking a step would cause the division of Rome, and made his decision. "The target is Rome," he said the following famous words while crossing the Rubicon River. The dice were cast. Now it was the Senate's turn to decide. They would either stay and fight against Caesar with the small number of soldiers they had, or they would go out of Rome and form a large army and then come back. The senators and Pompey Magnus, known as the conqueror of Spain, and the great people of the city. Caesar entered Rome, where the streets were empty. There were gangs, people killing each other, and a small number of supporters. In addition, his mistress, Servilia, who is also the mother of Brutus, who has an important place in our story, and some of his relatives also took him to Rome. Meanwhile, the Senate, under the command of Pompey Magnus, managed to quickly establish a large army. But although Caesar had a small number of soldiers, he managed to defeat the large Roman army. Commander Pompey Magnus fled to Egypt to establish a new army, while Cato, the fierce defender of the Republic, and his friends went to the north to establish their own army. They went to Africa. Caesar knew that a novel with the Senate was meaningless. He also had to get the support of the people, so he made a statement again and announced that he forgave those who fought against him. Nobles such as Chero and Brutus surrendered. After the success of Caesar's coup and the return of a significant part of the Senate, he found himself temporarily. He declared him as a dictator. If we say dictatorship, don't take it as it is today. It is an official title given in emergency situations in Rome, and it is a powerful authority with limited powers. Our journey to Egypt is our next stop. It is the land of pyramids and pharaohs. Things are complicated there. There is a puppet pharaoh Ptolemy, a boy in his teens, on the throne. I said Cleopatra, the sister and wife of the pharaoh, is both his sister and his wife. This may sound rightfully scary. However, since the lineage of the Egyptian dynasty is considered divine, the members of the dynasty are often married to each other. However, the terrible Caesar Pompey Magnus came to Egypt after him with only 500 soldiers. There was an Egyptian pharaoh, Little Ptolemy, who told Caesar that there was a surprise. This surprise was Pompey. He was still the Roman consul with the head of Magnus. Besides this unforgivable moment, he only had 500 soldiers, and he could be killed by the pharaoh at any time. He also implemented a clever plan to replace the exiled Cleopatra. He had her found and had her kidnapped. According to the story, Cleopatra was brought before Caesar, wrapped in a carpet. Their first encounter was like this. As a result of the coup, Ptolemy was killed. He was fed to the crocodiles in the Nile River, and Cleopatra took his place. In this process, an emotional rapprochement began between Cleopatra and Caesar, but this was not a simple rapprochement. Cleopatra could speak 45 languages at an advanced level, had a good command of ancient Greek philosophy, as well as being an expert in mathematics and astronomy, and also had a good military education. She also knew how to impress a man like Caesar. 400 ships accompanied a party she organized on the Nile River, and Caesar was more than falling in love with her. He could not stop himself. He stayed in Egypt for a while, and this time he went to Anatolia. The Pontus state in Anatolia was a great power and began to threaten Rome. A very bloody war took place in today's Tokat province. With Caesar's victory, the last Caesar is here. Ven said his famous words, that is, I came, I saw, I conquered. In fact, in 2012, Tokat's Zile district municipality registered this saying. In addition, the word vidi, that is, I saw, in the sentence also inspired the word video today. He also completely destroyed the armies. Honorable defenders of the Republic, such as Cato, who led these armies, committed suicide instead of surrendering. Caesar was now able to establish a definitive domination over the entire country. Since he pardoned the remaining senators, there was no visible opposition against him. Moreover, he stopped corruption and extortion and made a move by distributing land to the people. He also managed to gain the support of some ordinary Romans. Caesar was also a devout pagan who believed in the classical Roman gods, and even painted himself in the colors of the god Jupiter during the victory celebrations he organized, presenting himself to the public and sacrificing the king of the entire Gaul country, which he had held captive for many years, to the gods in religious ceremonies. Although Caesar was positive, even though he seemed to be following a policy, his increasing power gave the impression that he would turn into a tyrant in the Senate. The fact that he had a throne built for himself in the Senate was perceived as a sign of this. The fact that he greeted the senators who came to visit him by sitting instead of standing was the last straw. Moreover, his marriage with Cleopatra was the last straw for both the public and his official mistress. The most powerful woman in Rome and the mother of Brutus made Servile very angry. Roman citizens called Cleopatra the Kings. Servile opened the doors of her house for the meetings of the generals and senators who were trying to prevent Caesar. Pro-Republican senators put forward several plans, and the decision was made by Caesar. He was stabbed to death by everyone in the middle of the Senate. On March 15, 44 BC, a group of senators summoned Caesar to the Forum to read a petition asking him to return his power. But the petition was a deception. When Caesar began to read the fake petition, Tius Sim, who had presented the petition to him, called Caesar to the Forum. Caesar came down with his ace. While he was shouting, "This is an atrocity," Casca drew his dagger and cut the dictator's throat from side to side. Caesar said to Casca, "You traitor, what are you doing?" He called out, "My brothers, help me." At this moment, the rest of the group, including Brutus, shot Caesar. They started stabbing. According to estimates, more than 60 people were involved in the assassination, and Caesar was stabbed 23 times. The dictator of Rome died like this, but Caesar's death did not bring the expected result. The senators thought that the trace of the witness would be erased, and the Republic would be reborn. But the assassination gave birth to a new and bigger civil war. Because Caesar's closest general, Marcus Antonius, and his 17-year-old nephew, the philosopher Octavius, wanted to take the power to themselves, not to leave it. Octavius and Marcus Antonius agreed and made an alliance against the Senate. The civil war was devastating. Thousands of mutual assassinations were carried out. Countless battles took place, extending to the Aegean Islands. Commander of the armies of the Senate, the hands of the famous philosopher Cicero, who said, "If a man has a garden and a library, what else can one ask for?" Brutus, the noblest name of Rome, were cut off by Marcus Antonius's men and hung on the door of the Senate. Brutus, on the other hand, instead of surrendering when he was defeated, chose to resist alone on the battlefield and fought in battle. Most of the Republicans who lost, died with honor in the field, chose suicide. Those who were left behind somehow submitted to Marcus Antonius and the young Octavius. Now it will be the turn of Marcus Antonius and Octavius to share power. When Marcus Antonius was defeated by Octavius, he went to Egypt. A new love opened its doors, Marcus Antonius and Cleopatra. They got married as allies and two crazy lovers. They declared war when they were young together, but Octavius, who was a child, managed to defeat them with his genius. No one thought that this young man would suddenly appear and become the most powerful person in the world. After the defeat, the two crazy lovers who did not surrender chose suicide. Marcus Antonius' soldier tradition. He committed suicide with his own sword, as per the Egyptian religion. Cleopatra died by having herself poisoned by a snake, in accordance with the Egyptian religion. Cleopatra was the last pharaoh of Egypt, and she tasted death at a young age. When Octavius entered Egypt, he first wanted to see the tomb of Alexander the Great. When they told him that they could show him the tombs of other kings, "I am not ordinary men," he said, "I came to see the tomb of a real king." So what happened to the future of Rome, which turned into an empire? What happened? He took the name Octavius Augustus, became the first emperor of Rome, and carried out a very successful management process. He was called the philosopher emperor by the people. He ruled the world from a humble home, but he ruled the world from himself. Then many crazy emperors had uncontrolled power. Arrogant men who only thought about themselves came to power. There was no separation of powers. The Senate lost its influence day by day. Yes, friends. Actually, this is how the collapse of Rome began. It started with that first step on that day, when Caesar crossed the Rubicon River. See you.